Thank you for this extremely valuable and informative comments. I take the freedom to myself comment upon what is now there about polycentricism, and I would claim that all cities are a collection of centers of varying size. Thus, they are all polycentric. You think of that and then we go ahead. So, for the audience, many rural areas show a decline and lack of economic prospects. The economic future of rural areas in an urbanized world is problematic. Some willing commentators? Yes, Andre.
Well, I feel addressed by this question, as you can imagine. Well, I think that if we look at the history, somebody yesterday or today was citing Fernand Braudel, and about the history of the cities. Well, it's quite obvious that cities build also on their hinterland and also in close relations with rural areas. And they are built on the agricultural surplus as well. So there's a huge and historical relation between rural areas and cities on the one hand. But at the moment, it's quite clear that there is a new divide and that most of people are moving to the cities and that's create new conditions. So I think that maybe now the main question could be in the past, cities were really dependent about rural areas for their food and for their needs and so on. Is it still true? Will it be still true in the future? And we have a first answer regarding the occupation of soils, the land uses. Now it's obvious and it's more and more clear that the occupation of soils within rural areas is more and more decided by citizens with their agriculture, with their natural areas, or places for leisure or tourism and so on. And these rural spaces, which are quite large, of course, I think their organization and their use is more and more and will be more and more decided by citizens and by people living in urban areas as well.
Just to add to that, it simply may be that rural-urban is a false dichotomy. For example, in the United States, a county is defined by the census as urban if I'm not quite sure what. It's got a center city of so many people, and it's got commuters to the central city of the metropolitan area of so many people. But we have, for example, in Columbus, Ohio, counties, half of which are urban, feel urban, and half of which are rural. They're farms and they're countryside. Or if you look at something like recreation, places, are they rural or are they urban? Well, they're rural, as we understand rural now. But they're really, used by people that live in cities. So I think maybe we hinder ourselves. Maybe speaking to Ms. Didi, I hope I said that right. Maybe not in a sense of an institutional sense of, or a political sense, having a town planning department or having in the U.S. HUD, human, I forget what it is, urban development, human and urban, whatever it is, HUD. Oh, housing and urban development. Maybe not in a political sense, but in an academic sense or in an intellectual sense, we really may be choosing a false dichotomy, I think. I actually wouldn't have said this maybe even an hour ago, but as you raise the questions and I think about them, I think that may be very much the case.
Thank you. Oh, Hans.
I think that we also should remember that there is a continuously out migration going on from the cities. So we have been talking very much about migration into the cities, but what we can see that for many firms it is more optimal to be located outside cities, and particular manufacturing industries, scale productions, and some areas are perhaps prosper very much from out migrations.
Yes, Thomas.
Well, if we have this rural-urban divide along across history, and when there is nobody in the rural areas, there is an army in the rural areas to protect the border, and so on, to police because the rents of the property rights of the rural areas are crucial to keep the cities. At the same time, even if you don't protect that, and if you allow free migration, then people can migrate from rural areas in poor countries to rural areas in rich countries. That was never accepted. But if someone wants to keep people in the countryside to control that, then eventually in Portugal we'll begin to have Africans from Cape Verde to have in rural areas. So it's a system that can evolve naturally in a world that is becoming more migrant.
Well, to avoid the dichotomy in Sweden, we did divide between urban areas, urbanized countryside, and the countryside, meaning that urbanized countryside where people live, but actually they work in the city, but they live in rural environments. I think we have to go on. So, Robert, here's something for you to bite in.
Yes. Yes. I think that well, in this specific field of environmental externalities, in regional science we have a sufficient amount of evidence, sufficiently stable and accepted, agreed about. We know which is the size which minimizes the cost of managing the city, which is very strict, is something for sure. Well, around 50,000 inhabitants. We know that for the environmental, in terms of environmental effects, we have also once again the primacy of medium-sized cities that are by far have a less environmental impact than the bigger, very big players. Of course, when you may go beyond these relatively limited sizes, if and only if the benefits that you reach with increasing size overcome the costs. And I still keep the idea that from a certain level the increasing cost is higher than the increasing benefits. I really have problems in understanding why we should reach in a volunteer effort the size of more than 10-15 million people. I never saw something really convincing on the side of benefits, beyond the fact that in reality there are cities like this. So everybody, well, many people claim we are Hegelian, and we will say that reality is rational because it's real. But many times we may make mistake, and this is not, in my opinion, the case. So we have to really be very careful on what we gain with sizes. Beyond the element that also Peter was recalling of the internal structure, the polycentric internal structure of these big conurbation. And then we have not just these elements in terms of ecological or environmental effects, but we have to be also very careful to the social requirements, as I said before. And I would say this morning we had many interventions and many presentations that have underlined the crucial role of a very reduced territorial dimension, which is the dimension of the neighborhood, where many things pass which are terribly important. And this is not just for the sake of the social city, but also the creative city. There were some interventions, Luigi's intervention, but others, recalling that the neighborhood dimension, we could also there discuss which could be the size but also that dimension in a kind of fractal layers is also very important. And here we have also to think about an extra element, which is the social diversity. We many times are easily kind of extrapolated to the whole population, the entire population, which is our own lifestyle. But we are a limited community of very mobile people. And the extreme is our friend Peter, who has for sure many more interactions with the stewards of the pilots of KLM than with his neighbors, for sure. But we have only one Peter Nyken in the world. Lifestyles and values are varied. So I think that we should take all these elements of the puzzle together, working at the different appropriate levels, starting from the level of the neighborhood, and then to the one of the city and of the system of interacting cities, so the polycentric metropolitan areas and the city region. When we speak, and in particular when we act and decide on cities.
Thank you, Roberto.
Just a hero.
Thank you, Jeremy. Considering demerit of urban agglomeration economies, view of urban or city management is very important. Management in this context means not only adjust difference between social versus private cost in business sense, but also maximize effects of agglomeration effects generated in the city. So depending on geographically, historically settings of city, shape of agglomeration should be different. So I argue management is important.
Thank you. Robert.
it's an interesting question, but it seems to be suspended in the kind of political and institutional vacuum. I can imagine that governance might be an intervening variable, so it is completely left out of the equation.
Yes, I think that the statement, net efforts arising in urban agglomeration on term ecological side is positive, should be integrated with conditions. Why? Because I think that the idea of sustainability in ecological dimension is the capacity to reproduce, to regenerate the capitals in the long time. And if we were not able to regenerate through circular processes, this statement is not verified, not confirmed. So I will add to add, I will suggest to add some conditions. I proposed this morning the circular organization of the city.